All right, screenagers, we are back yet again. As always, it's another episode of the Canon, your favorite movie podcast, the one and only movie podcast, as always, providing you with a watch list of the most essential movies ever made. My name is Raf. We've got another amazing episode lined up for you today. The next 2 weeks, we're going to be talking some Disney animation. Very excited for this. Our guest for today and for next week, but we'll get to next week. Let's focus on today. Mr. Jacob Holmes, one of our favorite Saw contributors, is joining us. He has cornered the market as our Saw Disney animation aficionado. I didn't know that was something that was necessarily his lane, but we'll discover that more over the course of this episode. So, Jacob, welcome back. How are we doing?
Doing great, man. Yeah, I just slipped in. Apparently, I know that we have some Saw contributors here that just completely disregard animation. But yeah, I've been on the animation train. As a kid, I had a Pixar bedroom.
Oh, hell
Because
yeah.
I like to draw, so I just had Pixar everything. That was my goal in my early childhood, was to work for Pixar um, as an animator, and I had up until maybe Up. I had
hmm
not just every Pixar DVD, but every special DVD with 10 hours of behind the scenes content, and I watched all of it like completely. So I have all the Pixar lore somewhere in the back of my brain somewhere.
Amazing. I think the only Pixar movie in the canon is Toy Story. Oh, no, The Incredibles, too. But we haven't talked about The Incredibles yet. But today we're going to be talking some old school Disney animation, some very pre Pixar stuff. Today we're going to be talking Bambi, which I know is a movie that you love and enjoy. I hadn't seen this movie in like 20 years, so it was fun to revisit uh, and like get reacclimated to to Bambi and its story and all that good stuff. So I guess we can just sort of like well, actually, before we jump in, I'm going to ask you about something completely separate, and maybe animation will pop up. But Jacob, you do the pole position series for Screen Age Wasteland, which like covers Oscar race, Saw Awards race, all that good stuff. Any updates on that front, or is it too early in the year, in the season, to know what might be a contender down the line?
We're talking about overall, the
Overall, if there's anything on the animation front that is worthy of
so
bringing up.
there's a huge movement on the animation front, and I think I wrote pole position is in that weird off season mode where I sometimes I'll write it, sometimes I won't. We're about to
Mhm.
have Can this week, so Can is this week, and we're gonna get a lot of first looks at highest to lowest, which is on my 10 best picture list, on my list of 10 to start with. We'll see how the reactions affect that. Um, Ari Aster's Eddington. I don't have that
Mm.
on my list until further notice, but if it somehow gets rave reviews, that's an option. Um, there's one that's gotten a lot of buzz that I moved up to my 10 for now. Um, called Sound of Falling. It was
Mm.
getting some rave reviews. It's international, but I can't even remember the exact plot. It's like four different young girls across generations, and their stories start to intertwine or something. Um, but it's gotten rave reviews, so we'll see. Um, Julia Ducournau, the one who did Titan, she has a
Mhm.
movie coming out there called Alpha. I believe that's out. Um, Lynn Ramsey, the director of You Were Never Really Here. We need to talk about Kevin. She's got a movie starring Jennifer Lawrence and Robert Pattinson, Die My Love, that people are pretty excited about, that comes out at Cannes. There's got to be, I think there's something else bigger at Cannes that I'm overlooking, but um, probably the biggest thing that's changed
Maybe not
since
an Oscar contender, but isn't Mission Impossible debuting there and
I do
premiering there?
believe I do believe so, and
It should be an Oscar contender.
you never know. You never know. It could be. We'll see how that's treated. If it's I think it has to be really good to be an Oscar contender,
Yeah.
being part 8 or whatever, or the 8th in the franchise. But the other big thing, obviously, is Sinners, um,
hmm
which has so much traction right now, and it's hard to see it not right now. It's hard to not see it in the Best Picture 10. I think that's going to have a lot of love that stays. It feels like it has staying power. I don't know how it will be across the board. I think Ryan Coogler could get in. It's not going to have a lot of actors. Like, I think the way that the actors are in the movie, I don't think any of them have a good shot at getting in the actor races. But the animation front, there's huge news because Wildwood, the front runner potentially from Leica Studios, so that's like a
Hmm.
stop motion, is delayed to 2026.
Oh, damn.
So that is a huge. Um, the animation race is shaping up already to be so good for 2026 because Brad Bird is supposed to be working on a 60s like spy noir um, animated
That sounds
project
awesome.
called Ray Gun, and yeah, and they're apparently he's it's been delayed a lot because he's trying to get all the money he needs to spend on it, and so um, I'm really excited about the next year in
That
animation.
sounds awesome. It's called Raygun. Is it based
Yeah,
on the Australian breakdancer from the Olympics? Was that
I
her
hope.
name?
Yeah, yeah, and it's spelled like I think it's spelled like how she spells it. So yeah, maybe
That sounds awesome. So not much on the animation front. Yeah, I wonder if Sinners will fall more into like the challengers bucket or the Dune bucket, where it's like, yeah, this movie was great, but it came out in like March or April, and like challengers, I feel like last year, a lot of people were like, yeah, this is one of the better movies from the year, but then by the time it got to like Oscar race season, the voters kind of forgot about it, even though in many people's books, in my books, like that movie was as good as anything else and like deserved recognition and like
I still haven't
cinematography,
seen.
score, editing, like all of those categories, obviously. So,
I
um,
still have not caught up and seen Challengers, and
oh
um,
wow.
so yeah, I'm behind on that. I do think it has more of a chance at like a Dune track which Dune Part Two is not the greatest track either, to be
Hmm.
honest, but it would get you in Best Picture. I think you could hold on to Best Picture even if it loses out like above the line. Ludwig Göransson's going to be in score. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think there's a chance
But
that
I
he's.
mean, we thought that for the Challenger score, like that was the best score from last year,
Yeah,
and
but I
then
feel like there's maybe like so Challengers when it came out, people loved it, but they didn't necessarily treat it with immediate
mhm,
Oscar hype. Like this was like a great movie that the Oscars won't really vibe with. I don't think Ludwig Göransson's score is going to be deniable. It could win, but it could
mhm.
at least make the top five. But we'll see because when you have a bunch of movies you don't know, um, when they come out, if they got a lot of good scores coming out at the end of the year, they could forget about it.
Yeah,
But music was so integral to Sinners that it would be hard to see that slip out. Honestly,
it would. Great movie. How do we go from Sinners to Bambi? How do we do that? Well, I guess we don't. We're just gonna go hard cut over to Bambi. Um, so to start the conversation on Bambi, I think what I want to ask you about first is still kind of like thinking about modern contemporary cinema. There has been a big boom in the last, what, 10 years, maybe not even 10 years, maybe like 7 years of Disney doing these so called live action remakes of a lot of their classic animated films. And I think we're obviously gonna talk about how the animation in Bambi is some of the most beautiful artwork you'll ever see in or outside of film. So I was curious if you know whether or not Disney is planning, if there have been announcements to do a live action, and we're doing that with hard air quotes, live action remake of Bambi. Do you know if that's something that they're planning on doing?
it's a good question. So obviously that would be in the vein of like Jungle Book and Lion King, in terms of everything animated, or in Jungle Book everything but Mowgli. Um, I think at times I've seen rumors and clip. I don't think there's been anything like Disney's plowing ahead with a live action Bambi that I've seen. And it depends too on how like Lilo and Stitch is going to break the box office this summer, and so Disney can continue to learn all the wrong lessons from that.
Hmm.
Um, they just had Snow White though, which is more more closer to Bambi in terms of
Hmm.
time passed, and Snow White was a total mess. Um, but we're going to talk about that next week.
Yeah, at
so I
length
won't
for
get,
sure. Yeah.
so I won't get into that. But I mean, it's going to be if they do a live action Bambi. I always have hope that they can do something that is kind of, Lion King for all of its faults looks incredible. Like it looks incredible. The lack of emotion on the animals' faces, they kind of fixed that slightly for like Mufasa. The
Hmm.
sequel was better. It was better in that regard. If they do Bambi, I think they're going to have to lean into like a more cartoony look. The animals in Snow White were adorable. So I mean,
Hmm.
they could lean into that, but it still would be really tough. And whatever it is, it's going to be a disservice probably to the craft of the original. I mean,
Yeah. The reason that you make a movie about deer and other forest animals, you know, the reason you make it animated is because you can do so much in terms of like making them expressive and have emotion and things like that that you just like can't do when it's just like computer generated photorealistic versions of animals, which, I hated the Lion King remake. I thought it was like a total abomination and like a was like just one of the most like offensive things in the history of filmmaking. Like everything
I mean, yeah, awful.
that it
Like
stood for.
like the story was still pretty good, obviously, because they were working off of the original Lion King story. Although the original Lion King story is not that original.
Yeah, just
um,
Hamlet.
and also Bambi in Africa, which is literally
Yeah,
what when they first started developing Lion King, they were like, "Let's do Bambi in Africa." That's a legit thing.
yeah.
If you look on the Wikipedia, um, so like you know what was really special about the Lion King original movie was that emotion and the way that the with that expression of the animals and stuff. And then when you try and make it live, it just doesn't work. I think they would have been better off if they had treated it like a nature documentary where the story of the
Mhm.
Lion King is going on, but we just had like a narrator, like it's like a Discovery Channel thing, where it's like
Yeah.
Simba running off after his father's death. We'll follow him. It's customary for a young male to leave the pride if his father is killed by a rival.
That would have been a way to go. I think I'm thinking if they were to do a Bambi remake instead of doing the Lion King approach where it's like these like weird computer generated like semi-realistic versions of forest animals, what they should do is go like hundreds of beavers route, and it's just like people in deer, rabbit, skunk, bird costumes, just like like on like a very obvious like sound stage of a forest, instead of like trying to just like again do like realistic style deer that are talking. Like you're gonna lose all of the magic of the original Bambi if you try to go that route. So like give us something that's like different and fun and inventive, and maybe hundreds of beaver style people in deer costumes is the way to go. Like that would be a fun way to reimagine the story of Bambi, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I don't think you can like the magic of Bambi. I don't think you can recapture it in 2025. I don't. For one thing, there's not nearly enough action in Bambi to sustain a modern audience like theatrical thing. People will go and be like, "This is so boring," but like, and I honestly like, I'm sure there's a lot of people today that watch Bambi and think the same thing. But I'm curious. Like you said, you hadn't watched it in so long. Do you remember like what you thought of Bambi as a kid, and then like what you thought of it when you just rewatched it?
Yeah, so Bambi was never my favorite Disney movie growing up as a kid. I always was aware of it. I had seen it. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't something that I like revisited a ton. I was big on like The Lion King, Aladdin. I would revisit Snow White a lot. Surprisingly, Cinderella. Um, Maybe because I had sisters, or maybe just because I love the story of Cinderella. But yeah, those were the ones that I was like really revisiting a lot. And Bambi wasn't necessarily like within my rewatch circle for Disney movies. But rewatching it this time, it's interesting that you say there's not a lot of action. It's like in a weird way, it's like kind of like a hangout movie. Like you're just hanging out with these forest animals, which is a funny concept for a movie. Like, okay, animated film about these forest creatures and these forest animals, and we're just sort of chilling with them and just like experiencing life with them. There's not a lot of like real like plot or drama that's going on, but we're just sort of hanging out with this dude Bambi for an hour and 15 minutes, which is cool, which is great.
Well, and I think so from my experience, like I remember watching Bambi somewhat decent amount as like a young child. Because I think I went to aftercare a lot, and Bambi was maybe in the rotation, not as much as certain other movies like Casper the Friendly Ghost, which I've watched an ungodly amount of times. Um,
I ran out of the theater when I saw that because I was scared of Casper.
that's hilarious. Um, but I know that in my later years, and I think some of this was how Disney began to market it. I didn't have any real connection to Bambi one way or the other, but they is almost took on like a kind of very feminine marketing. Like everything
Oh,
with
interesting.
Bambi Thumper was very flowery and very soft and very like, and it didn't feel like as a young man you're like, that's not really for me. It's for girls. Like that's flowery stuff. And I was really
Hmm.
caught off guard whenever I rewatched it like a year or two ago. I was just caught off guard by how much I was like, this is maybe the greatest animated film of all time. It's like it goes one and two with one other movie, which I might talk about a little later. So, uh,
Hmm.
but it's right there.
In terms of using animation and like understanding animation as an art form, like this is so good. One of the things that really stood out to me this time around was the like stark contrast of how just like everyday life within the forest or within the woods is depicted. It's like kind of realistic and all that stuff. And then when there are these moments of like heightened danger or tension, they like the color. It's not even like the colors are muted, but it becomes this like really expressive like form of animation where like the deer just become like silhouettes, and then they have like these really like stark like backgrounds. Like it's not just like these greens, but it's like these like heavy like reds and purples and blues and stuff. And to like, I don't know, just the inventiveness of that sort of like method of animation really stood out to me, instead of just like, which like going back to making a remake, like you can recreate that, but it's very unlikely that they would try to recreate that aesthetic in a live action remake, which again, going back to The Lion King, is like the entire problem with that movie. Like the aesthetic of that movie is so boring and flat and lifeless in a way that animation is not, because it allows you to add like all of this vibrant expression through the artwork. That just it's so amazing and it lives on forever. This movie's what, 80 years old, and it's still like one of the best looking things that you'll ever look at. What do you think of like the animation and like how it's
It's
used and like utilized to like tell the story and all that?
it's absolutely classic and ageless. Like the animation is so good. Like there's no way to improve, I guess, maybe on it because the what you're doing is just people drawing with it being the 2D animation. It's just people drawing the shapes and the characters in motion, and like we're talking about some of the best animators that have ever worked at Disney doing this stuff, both on the characters and what's amazing is and of course is the backgrounds, which were actually done by I think a Chinese artist, who it's so like it's weird because Bambi might be Disney's most American film. Like technically,
Interesting.
technically it's set in Maine, although that
Hmm.
doesn't matter at all to the movie because like the deer, like none of the animals know they're in Maine. They don't
Yeah.
recognize borders probably. Um, but like you can feel like it's a forest that feels American, and part of
Hmm.
that's just because I mean Bambi's a white-tailed deer, which is American, and um, you just but yet the art style is really probably not American, but it did such a beautiful job of capturing like the magic of the forest, just this like painterly quality of the forest and the depth and the things that Disney. I think Disney was really working with like creating depth in their backgrounds at this time. So we're going to talk next week about Snow White, but I think if Snow White was like the showed the incredible potential of like the feature length animated film, I
Hmm.
don't think Disney really put it all together until Bambi.
Yeah, this
Um,
comes out what, 5 years after Snow White?
yeah, I'm looking. So yeah, 5 years after Snow White, and then in the middle of that, they did their other very artistically unique thing with Fantasia, and I think in a
Yeah.
lot of ways Bambi is like the build up between Fantasia and Snow White. And one of the things I was most excited to talk about with Bambi, one of the reasons I think Bambi is so freaking good and
Hmm.
something that you might not be able to reproduce now, especially Fantasia. So Fantasia is not really a movie. We
Hmm.
treat it like a movie, but it's really just a collection of shorts. It's like an artistic experiment. But
Yeah.
Bambi is a narrative story that uses the same like gist of Fantasia. Like the score of Bambi is so perfectly aligned with the action on the screen. Like every time Bambi wobbles or slips on the ice, there's like a musical note
Hmm.
accompanying it, and something about that is just so satisfying. Um, the actual songs in the movie, you know, people might not resonate so much with, like Little April Showers. I
Yeah.
think Little April Showers is still incredible for what it does with like the thunderstorm build
Banger.
up element and everything. Like I love that sequence, but just the score in the non musical, non singing scenes is just incredible. And it when you're talking about the like more abstract when the action rises, you have that all those clashing of like symbols and just that rising. It's very
Yeah.
different than like Lion King's film score is incredible, but it's not necessarily it's underpinning the emotion, but in Bambi it's like underpinning the actual action and movement. And
Yeah.
I just never seen anything that quite hits at that level of what Bambi does.
The the movement aspect is really interesting. Also, we should just note that your dog is also very excited about Bambi. It sounds
Yes,
like.
well, he looks a little like Bambi, except he's white, but
He's got a lot to say about Bambi. He's going on and on about the animation style and the music and everything, and we love it. Um,
I may bring him in if you want to share a few thoughts about Bambi, so maybe he's less disruptive.
yeah, let's bring him in.
All right, yeah. So this is Domino. This is not the dog that was causing the issues, but and she's a little more like Thumper than Bambi. She's a really sweet girl, and they all like to be together, so they all ran in the room, and so now we have three little dogs in here, and hopefully they will relax.
Amazing. We love having three pups around, and these dogs are not nearly as vicious or mean as the dogs that appear in Bambi with the hunters that Bambi has to fight off. But we were talking before about, or you were talking before about those like first three animated features from Disney Studios, and it made me think about how like today in 2025, when I hear Disney, I think of just like this evil media empire that is so lifeless and cruel in terms of like the can we even call it art that they produce at this point? Like it's just slop that they're feeding us. Like there's not a whole lot of like great art that comes out of it. But then, you know, you think about those first three movies, you think about Bambi, you think about Fantasia, you think about Snow White, and you're like, oh my God, yeah, this, you know, Walt Disney for uh as much as he has like become this like evil villain figure in pop culture, in media, like they were cranking out some amazing, incredible art. And Bambi is like at the top of that. And like that's, kind of why they were able to become the evil empire that they are now, because, so many moons ago, like they were giving us incredible, amazing movies like Bambi.
Yeah, like I mean, now you think of Walt Disney more so as a visionary businessman who led to this kind of rise of what's almost an evil media conglomerate. But I mean, Walt Disney was also very much a visionary artist. And one of my recs next week that I'm saving for the Snow White episode will cut to that point. I mean, Walt Disney was an incredible visionary artist, and even the things that he did commercially, he wanted to be artistic. I mean, even the idea of Disney World, um, he had this artistic kind of vision for it in addition to the commerce that was very wholesome. And obviously, in many ways, Disney World is still magical and wholesome, but it's every day and every year becoming more and more commercially corporate.
Yeah.
Disney World has lost a lot of magic since I was a kid,
Yeah.
like a
Part of
ton.
that might just be that you're no longer a kid, and like for kids it's still magical, but it also does feel like
I will.
Disney has become more of just like corporate brand than artistic brand, that happens to make money because they're just like giving us good art.
Well, an example of how Disney World has become less magical, and this is probably, I mean, this is probably fair and it's necessary, but for the cast members. But when I was a kid and you went to Disney World, cast members were walking around as the characters, and it was like so magical. You could be walking on your way to wherever you're going in Animal Kingdom and just kind of run across Chippendale or Aladdin and
Yeah.
get a picture. And now it's a completely meet and greet because I'm sure it's like a danger to the cast members and there's liabilities and stuff. But
Hmm.
nothing screams corporate commercialism like liability and stuff when you're trying to think about magic.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you can commercialize magic, which is like the entire Disney brand as it exists today. But once upon a time, or the reason that we were able to get to this form of just like immense corporate, commercial Disney, is because they made really, really, really good stuff like Bambi. And it sucks that, in my view, they are no longer making really, really, really good stuff that is as artistically rich as something like Bambi, and instead are just like giving us, you know, again,
Yeah.
cheap carbon copies. Like, oh, like let's just do a live action remake of Bambi because it will make a gazillion dollars, as opposed to like we should remake this because it will be a really interesting exercise in filmmaking, in storytelling, in artistry, all that stuff. Like all that stuff is lost, which sucks so much. But it is also great to rewatch something like Bambi and be reminded of what it was that made Disney so, the ubiquitous enterprise that it is today as a brand.
Yeah, and what there is to strive to in art and what, whether it's Disney or whether other companies need to come and start taking a piece of the pie, what animated art can be versus what it has become. I mean, and you still have Pixar every now and then trying to make something artistically meaningful. Although they haven't been as hot on that as they should. Um, but you have people making swings like Into the Spider Verse is such a is it's very different than Bambi. It's so bombastic and it's IP loaded and everything, but there's that from an animation standpoint, it's like they're trying to bring these really artistic things. You had Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, Flow. I mean, Flow is such an interesting work of art, and now
Hmm.
they're starting, Oscars wise, they're starting to recognize that so much more. And if we can get back to world where we get animated movies like Bambi, I'll be so very happy.
It would be so great. There's, I mean, the amazing thing about animation as an art form and like a storytelling technique, a medium, if you will, is that it's like it's so much more boundless than everything else that we're able to do in terms of, you know, live action filmmaking. Obviously, in live action filmmaking, there are so many different tools and whatnot that filmmakers and people have in terms of like how to tell their story. But like with animation, literally, you know, everything is your oyster as long as you can think it up and have someone to draw it. Like you can make it happen, and you see that in Bambi, whether it be the scenes in the forest where it's like presented as this like beautiful utopia with all these great colorful flowers and creatures and birds and butterflies and like all that stuff, or if it's, you know, wanting to express like extreme danger because there are hunters coming, or Bambi has to fight another deer in order to, you know, secure uh the love of his, you know, romantic interests. Like you can do all of that within animation in ways that you can't do it, you know, you can't always do it with, again, live action filmmaking. And it's weird that like we realized that in when did this come out, 1942?
Right? Yeah, 1942.
And 1942, and for some reason like we've seemed to have lost that in the last like 30 years, despite all of the great examples that you listed of like recent films that are maybe trying to get us back to pushing the boundaries of what we can do within animation again.
And this might be something that this discussion might be better to take a full form when we're talking about Snow White, because I just feel like there's so much to talk about. Snow White is so seminal as being the first movie, but it's sad to me. And Snow White to Bambi and everything did this as great as Bambi is as art, and I think as an adult you should be able to appreciate Bambi, full stop. But because Disney introduced a feature length animated film, and because they're a family company targeted to children, we this it's led to this dismissal of animation when, like, I think film is kind of the epitome of art in the sense that it basically brings every form of art together. And so when you look at animation, when you look at all the great visual art of the past, whether it's Da Vinci's sketches or Claude Monet or any of that stuff, if you were to try and put that to film, it would be animation, not live action.
Hmm.
And you see this painterly art in Bambi that's so beautiful that you can't, like, photography, no matter how beautiful it is a different thing.
Hmm.
Um, and trying to render photorealistic environments is a different thing than just having straight up beautiful painted backdrops, which is something I think we're really losing too in the CGI era. Is no matter how good you have it look, it's not, unless you are intentionally doing it, you're losing this like painted beautiful backdrop that, and then the way that the characters move through that is just stunning in Bambi.
It's absolutely, it's so beautiful. Yeah, the painterly aspect is really cool. I think it was in, I think you mentioned this in your Canon write up on the website, but apparently some of the artists who were working on Bambi spent like months at a time, like observing deer and other animals just like in the forest, existing so that they could, you know, capture like realistic uh, versions of their movement and things like that. But again, that's capturing that in the form of animation and adding some like artistic uh, like sensibility to it, as opposed to just like capturing photos or videos of deer walking through the forest, is like two totally different things. And it is like in Bambi, it's like this perfect marriage of, okay, like it's realistic to how things are in real life, but it is also in service of this story that we're trying to tell, this artistic expression that we're trying to communicate to the world or whatever it be.
And it's so interesting that you talk about that too. That's another great point that I wanted to talk about with Bambi. And Bambi was almost like the first Disney feature film. There was talks about it, but they, one of the struggles was they weren't sure how they were going to animate the deer. and it took
Mhm.
them a long time to find that perfect marriage. Um, and the I guess the films before this, although Fantasia may have had some, and of course, I mean, before that you had Mickey Mouse and things like that, and the very more cartoon silliness. But Bambi is a film all about animals, and they're anthropomorphic in some ways, but the level of anthropomorphic is dialed back. You know, it's not.
Mhm.
They're mostly existing within a natural environment. I love how they make zero comment about the familial structure of the deer. Like
Yeah.
Bambi's raised by a single mom, the dad's around, but we're not even addressing that. It's not even like that's just how deer work.
Yeah.
It's not treated like Bambi's dad is an asshole who
Yeah.
like ran
Like
off
he's a
on his
deadbeat.
mom.
Yeah.
It's like no, it's just deer. That's just deer behavior, and so it's just like kind of never addressed, and that's fine. And we get to see Bambi go through the life cycle um, of that, and then like Thumper and everything. Everyone acts like animals that just
Mhm.
happen to talk to each other, and they are more expressive than animals, obviously. But none of their expressions are really cartoony in the sense of like until you get the only scene that kind of sticks out a little bit to me is the Twitter pated sequence. Um,
Mhm.
there's a little bit of more cartoon like physics involved, like stiffening
Yeah.
up like an ironing board, and there's a little bit of that elsewhere in the movie, but that one sticks out a little more. But for the most part, their movements still feel like very natural, and that just goes such a long way, I think, in the film versus something like Madagascar, where they're just like
Yeah.
just walking around like humans.
Fully. Yeah. That's just fully. They lose all of their all of their animal qualities for the most part in Madagascar. That scene that you were talking about is so funny. Um, should we talk about the like extremely queer coded skunk character, which is like so funny for a 1942 Disney animated movie. Like I had totally forgotten about that, and rewatching it, I was like, this is a wild thing to be included in this movie
And
for seemingly no reason.
I don't know if they really intended that initially or how they went about that. The voice that they chose for adult
Yeah,
Flower was wild.
yeah.
Like it's just
Well,
like a shock. It's complete shock when Flower opens his mouth after he's grown.
what is it called? Twitter spaded or
Twitter pated.
Twitter
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 pated.
page. Uh, in that scene when the owl's like going through it, and he's basically like, "Yeah, guys, like you're all gonna get horny for girls at some point. Bambi, it's gonna happen to you. Thumper, it's gonna happen to you." And then he looks at Flower, and he's like, and there's like a brief pause, and Flower does like again like a very queer coded move, and the owl's like, "You know what? Even you too." And just like wild to be including this in this like children's movie again from 1942 about a deer, but uh I guess Disney has always been woke. So people who are complaining about it now, go back to Bambi and like it's always been there, I guess.
And it's funny because I don't think there was any controversy over that. There was no controversy about Flower's presentation of gender or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, although it's funny because Bambi was a flop for the most part, and in large part because of the gun lobby and the hunter lobby. There's like they did not like Disney humanizing deer in the film.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is interesting. So like we spoke about Dunkirk on this show a couple weeks ago, and one of the things in Dunkirk is the idea that the Germans are never really shown on screen. They're just like this like force that exists beyond the frame that is, causing danger for our characters. And the humans in this movie kind of exist in the same way, just like humanity in general. Like all we do is like we are just a threat on the outskirts of the frame that all we do is disrupt this sense of utopia that these characters and that these animals have. So I get it. Like, it's not the most fun if you're someone who like enjoys hunting to like watch a Disney movie and be like, wait, I'm the bad guy in this. But at the same time, like, if we can't have fun with that, then like, you know,
Who
maybe
is
you're
this?
taking yourself a little too seriously, Mr. Hunter guy. Like, let's ease up a bit.
Who is this movie
It's like
made
an
for? Is it
anime.
made for men or made for deer?
Yeah,
Why are we the villain? Where are we the villains in this? Humans, but they were. The funny thing is, the animals never really even say like men are humans or the. It's just like you said. It's an off screen kind of deal and kind of like and the animals never really like react like we got to take care of this or something. They just keep moving on. They like
yeah.
they
Again,
just
it's
keep
just
on
it's a
going.
hangout movie. It's just us like spending time with them within their lived reality, and that lived reality includes sometimes hunters come and they disrupt the peace of the utopia of the forest. And again, like if you're mad about this movie being anti-human, let me let you in on a little secret. There are thousands of movies that are very pro-human. So we can deal with one movie that is like, hey, maybe it's bad when we disrupt the peace of nature with our hunting and other, you know,
Yeah,
whatever else it is that we're doing as humanity to disrupt nature.
and I don't have a good grasp of this, but the original book Bambi apparently has more like not like man is kind of like not Nazi Germany and the deer are kind of like Jews. There's more like
Hmm.
metaphor, and there's even more like violence and just threats for the
Yeah,
deer. Like um, some
not
of
to
that
get too
message is
crazy, but there is a conversation that could be had, or a reading of this movie that could be argued that is about something like that. Or we could take it to like an extreme of like this movie is about the ills of like colonialism and how it just like disrupted these really peaceful existences that certain peoples and cultures or whatever had. And again, this just like force comes in from off screen and totally shakes things up in ways that seem like unfair and not so great. But that's like probably too deep of a reading into something like Bambi. I think it really is just supposed to be like this chill, like hangout movie about deer and their friends in the forest.
I think it stands to be said too that like probably like 80% of the people are like what the hell are y'all talking about? This other stuff like we haven't talked about the one thing that most people actually remember from Bambi,
Yeah,
which
I
is
was I was trying to see how long we could go without talking
yeah,
about
like
it, but
which is
let's
so traumatic apparently that people forget that it's such a small part of the movie and
yeah,
like it's relatively minor like it's like probably the most major event that happens but it's such a small amount of screen time
let's
um
talk about the Dumbo in the room, if you will.
but like so that's an incredible scene but it is funny to me that there's so much more to Bambi than that scene but
Hmm.
a lot of people won't watch Bambi because it's too sad but the movie Bambi is not sad. There's a very sad short scene. So, but what are your thoughts on this scene?
So this was interesting rewatching Bambi because I had remembered and had always been under the impression that that scene happens way earlier in the movie. That it's like just like all like the way that I remembered it, that was like the inciting incident, and everything that happens in Bambi came like after that. But rewatching it, I was like, oh, this is like halfway through the movie, maybe a little bit more than halfway through the movie. And you spoke about this in your write up, but the way that the scene is like presented to us after we already had that previous scene of the hunters, and again, when you rewatch the movie, you're like, oh man, Bambi's mom is about to die, and then they're both safe, and then we get to that next scene and it's like that's just like great storytelling of like you've set us up to have this moment, so like we are already aware of the danger that they present. We sort of like know the beats of how this is going to happen when it does happen, so it's just like a brilliant form of sort of like storytelling and filmmaking. And then obviously like again the animation and like switching over the animation style from like pretty realistic to like super expressive is so impactful for how we read that scene, that it's just it's really sad, but it's like masterful filmmaking, which
It
a lot of times like some of the best filmmaking is around like the saddest things in the world.
I mean, like, I understand people have a hard time watching even the whole movie for that scene, much less watching the scene by itself. But man, I wish they would. It's such a beautiful scene. It's like when Bambi turns around in the cave or the den or whatever, and he's like, "We
Hmm.
made it, mother, mother," and just like the way that it's like framed and that like all the frames of this movie are so beautiful, but the way like the opening of the den is and just like the kind of
Hmm.
blurred edges and Bambi just like looking hopefully out into the void, and then when he goes out and the snow falling when he sees his dad. I mean, all of that stuff is just so like beautiful, like animated.
Yeah,
It's like it's insane art.
it's it reminded me of, or this conversation reminds me of a movie that is also in the canon, and a movie that often gets hit with like that movie is like so good, so impactful, but I'll never rewatch it again because it's so heavy. And like for me, I kind of feel like a sicko because I'm like, this movie is like so technically sound, and it's really hard to like say XYZ thing is masterful when it's about like a terrible thing, and that's Schindler's List, which is like a horrible thing to like be like, yeah, I want to like revisit Schindler's List. Like, what do you mean? That's you're sick for that. But that movie is like so well made, and it is around like the most unimaginably sad, horrific thing that you could imagine or that like has happened. And the scene with Bambi's mom's death, like it reminds me of that, and that it's like I could rewatch that scene like over and over again because it is so spectacularly made as like a form of artistic expression, but like it's about the saddest thing in the world, like this kid's mom dying. So like, am I some kind of sick fuck for
The-
wanting to like rewatch it all the
I don't
time
know
to like be impressed by the filmmaking brilliance of it, even though it's about something horrific.
if you are a sick fuck, then we both are because I'm the same way. Like, I mean, I could just to watch that scene, like the masterful tone of the emotion. Like it's to the point where it's like I know what's going to happen. Like I can kind of like compartmentalize that part. Like I know what point in the story this is and everything. But like the way that it's told is just so like everything gels together. It's just when you love a certain craft, you just want to watch like the height of that craft, even
Yeah.
if it's a sad. You know what's really interesting though, because we've talked about Lion King already once, and
Hmm.
I mentioned how they were like, "Well, let's do Bambi in Africa." What do you think it is about the way Bambi does this? Because people also talk about how sad Mufasa's death is in Lion King.
Hmm.
Spoiler alerts if you haven't seen Lion King.
The
Um,
way that it's done here, I guess for me, like I love Lion King. Like that was, you know, a weekly rewatch as a child growing up. I think, the two of us as like 90s babies, like Lion King like is right in our wheelhouse. But I would say that that Bambi's mother's death is a way better scene in terms of how it is constructed as filmmaking and animation and storytelling and like all of that stuff coming together than the Mufasa scene is. And I think that's probably why it's harder for people to rewatch, is because, you know, because it is so well done that like the emotion hits you that much harder. And that just, again, because we're both sick fucks and we're like we love, the craft behind filmmaking and all of that stuff, we're like appreciating it for its artistry as opposed to just feeling the emotional weight of the scene, which like most people just walk away and they're like, wow, that really hit me so hard, I don't want to have to go through those emotions again. And we're like, yeah, but what about the use of color?
right. And what do you think about how the tone of the color made you also feel sad?
Yeah.
and how and how these
Yeah.
other things also contributed to your sadness. But it's
Yeah.
just so funny, like the average audience member, I don't think like when they think about the Mufasa death scene, they think it's like one of the saddest scenes of all time also. But
Mhm.
but that doesn't prevent them from watching The Lion King, and I don't think that they necessarily question that. It's just like, but Bambi, I think when they think about Lion King, they think about that scene in the whole movie context.
Hmm.
But like Bambi is more been relegated to just that scene almost. But it's
Yeah,
so important too to me that like when you if you remember that Bambi that way, it almost seems like everything after that moment is just sad. But
which
like
is weird because The Lion King is probably on its whole a much darker and sadder movie and sadder story, right? Like everything around Simba and his dad dying and like afterwards is like way way darker than like what happens with the rest of Bambi. Like he's like, okay, yeah, my mom died, whatever, now I'm gonna go get laid with some burned flower. Like we're just like we're on the we're on the hunt for tail.
and
Like that's the rest of the movie. Like the
the
rest of the movie isn't sad. It's not him being like, damn, like my mom died, I'm so sad about that. Whereas the rest of the Lion King is Simba being like, wow, my dad died, I'm so sad, you know.
exactly. And like and this is why too Bambi is also such a good coming of age story. It's really just like this super classic because you get Bambi born in spring and you
Hmm.
get to kind of see him growing up. You don't really think about it that much as summer, but he's just the summer in the forest, just growing up, learning that that's a butterfly, not a bird or whatever, and like just palling around with his friends. And that's just like the first season of life. And then you get into the fall and things start to get a little bit darker. And then in the winter, obviously the darkest thing happens. And then like he's told about it and it's really sad. And then he goes to sleep and he wakes up and it's spring and it's a new phase of life and life keeps going on. The forest keeps going on. Bambi keeps going and he just continues with his life. And like as bad
Yeah.
as that dark moment was, spring comes back, light comes back, and then you just keep growing. Like you just keep going through the seasons. And so that's such
That's
a
really
like
interesting.
that's
Yeah.
such a
This
beautiful way
like
to frame it.
yeah, that's amazing. Like framing it through the seasons as this sort of like cycle of life and like you said, the the darkest thing happening in winter is, as a season, we sort of think of it as like things like needing to die in order for things to then be reborn in spring, which is exactly what happens for Bambi. So like yeah, that framing uh, through the seasons is like brilliant for the story. And again, like we were saying, like it all ends up being like a pretty happy story at the end of the day. Like Bambi, he lives on, he goes on with his life. Like the forest continues to be this utopian place for him and his friends and his eventual family. Um, despite this like awful thing happening. But like, is it that awful? Like, unfortunately, death is a part of life. Like, we obviously don't want it happening at the hands of uh, hunters. We would have preferred that his mom died of like natural causes, but still, you know, it is a part of life. Winter is a part of life, and we must continue to live on as Bambi does. So, yeah, I think you're totally right. It's like a totally beautiful message in that regard.
And then we get the rest of the movie, which and then Bambi takes his place alongside his father as the Prince of the Forest, and we just don't talk about what that means for Feline. Uh,
Hmm.
and Feline's kid, because we end Bambi actually with Bambi's kids. I
Kids, yeah, I think they're
I rewatched
twins.
it very recently, but I didn't rewatch it like last night, so I forgot. But
Mhm.
yeah, two twin kids to begin their own. It's literally the circle of life. Literally,
It's
Lion
more
King,
s
Bambi in Africa. It's to the
it's
point,
more Circle of Life than The Lion King, to be
right?
quite frank.
It's not bullshit. The antelope eat the grass. Circle of life.
Yeah, it's literally just it is for Bambi this complete circle of life, including all of the ups and downs, the highs, the lows, the tensions, the friendships, the enemies and rivalries, the wisdom from older owls. It's got everything. It's your gay best friend who hasn't come out of the closet yet. Like it's got everything that we know life to be.
And out of this conversation, the one thing that we haven't spent too much time talking about, and I remembered, I mean, everyone likes Thumper. Everyone remembers Thumper as a great character. But like
Mhm.
rewatching it is like Thumper is the freaking best. Thumper's just hilarious and so like mischievous, like even more mischievous than I remembered him being.
An
And
all-time movie sidekick.
like just the funniest, like his expressions and every time his mom was getting on to him. and just
Yeah.
like the way they do his eyes, and he's like, I can't remember what the stinger was. When I rewatched it, I made note of it, but I forgot his little stinger when he's like, when you can't say something nice, don't say
Yeah.
nothing at all. And he like looks back at his mom, and he's like, I'd say just forget it entirely. Like,
It is funny, going back to like the family dynamics of animals. It's always Thumper's mom saying, "What did your dad tell you?" But the dad isn't there to like remind him. Again, just sort of like showing without like digging too deep into what it means or whatever, just like how animals like exist in their family lives. And then like we were saying when Bambi eventually has kids at the end with Feline, um, like his dad, it's not like he is there part of the raising them process. Like he's he's off doing his own thing, which is different from The Lion King in many regards because that is a movie about like father son relationships, which um again, like we don't need all movies to be realistic in how they depict like uh animal family dynamics. Like we can use lions to tell stories about like the beauty of father son relationships. We could have
yeah.
also done that with Bambi, but that's not what Bambi is
If
about
we were
ultimately.
if we were honor bound to do that in all movies, Finding Nemo would have been really really fucked up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another movie about animals and their family dynamics.
If you know
um
anything about how clownfish family dynamics work, Finding Nemo is a very different movie if it's true to
yeah.
life. It's very weird.
um so okay, we spoke about the scene. Do you have anything else on that scene in particular, the the death of
Yeah,
the
no,
mother?
I don't think so. I mean, it's just like when I know that when I was looking for a photo to go with the Canon articles, like I really wanted um, a screen from that scene because
Hmm.
that to me just captured the heart of Bambi more than just like the most flowery scene. Like that's the scene we remember, and that's the scene that captures like how serious this movie can be,
Hmm.
despite a lot of it being very happy and very frolicky or whatever.
Yeah, I like frolicky as a word for this. So we've kind of like bounced around this question a little bit, but just to sort of like pin it down or pin you down on it, to get your thoughts. Like, what do you think is like the overall like point thesis of this movie? Is there one? Is it just an expression of artistry? Is it about the evils of man and how we are so destructive to nature? Is it about family dynamics? Is it about the circle of life? Is it just a hangout movie? What do you think is like the point or thesis
I
of
would
this?
definitely lean toward. I definitely don't think it's a movie about the evil of man. I think the evil of man is or the destructive power of man is in there, but I don't think it's about it like at all. They don't ever
Hmm.
talk about it, so it can't really be about it. They're not like spending their days worried about it. It's just when they go out in the field, they're like, you got to be careful because there's danger. And then when they set the place on fire and the dogs and all that, it becomes a problem. But I think it's very much circle of life. I mean, from the fact of the way the movie is framed, with Bambi's
Hmm.
birth and ending with Bambi's and Feline's children, and going through because of the way that the seasons are connected to the life movements. I think it's very much a depiction of how life moves on and how different things are gonna like as you learn about your world. It gets darker and more complicated, but there's also still light, and you can still good things happen after bad things happen. I think as much as this is a movie for children, I think that was probably one of maybe the intended takeaways, especially with that hard cut from um, the death, the winter scene straight to spring and new love is like you will if bad things happen to you here, then a new season will come and new beautiful things, and then you still after that moment, it's not like everything's beautiful from there on out. Then they have the
Hmm.
hardship with the dogs coming in and stuff. So it's like it's just a big circle. You're gonna go through light and dark moments. You're gonna end up being just like your parents one day, you know,
Yeah.
to some degree. Um, and it's all just part of the circle of life before they co-opted that for Lion King and made it something totally nonsense.
Yeah.
Really, when you think
And
about it.
also in in like a contrast to The Lion King, where that is about the circle of life and like Simba fulfilling this like great destiny to be the king or whatever. Like, yes, Bambi ends up becoming the prince of the forest, but it is very much so like small scale circle of
Oh,
life stuff where it's like very relatable to like everyday people who we don't have aspirations of, becoming like world leaders or anything like that. It's just like, hey, like these are sort of like the beats of what like regular life for everyday people existing on this earth within like a very like limited scope looks like. And there's so much beauty in that, and just like going with that and appreciating that, which, like we always try to think about these movies and like existing within the context of when they first came out. And I guess in a lot of ways, like that it makes sense for like a movie in the early 40s to sort of like highlight and emphasize that for people, like, hey, like there's a lot of like shitty stuff going on in the world right now, mainly a global war that is engulfing like the entire globe, but like there is still beauty your in persevering and sticking through and like living through your everyday life with conviction and like with love and all that stuff. Like it gets dark, but it will all be okay. And there is a ton of beauty in just like the uh the simplistic nature of our life cycles, which is, I don't know that they were like totally going for that, but it does feel like that is something that's at play here for sure.
yeah, I mean, absolutely. Um, yeah, I mean, that's really a thing. I mean, I think we've pretty much gotten to the heart of Bambi. Um,
Yeah.
we didn't even mention Bambi. There's still a little something to be said, I guess. Like, so Bambi is kind of, and this is another funny thing about it being kind of cast as a feminine type movie, because
Mhm.
Bambi is a male and he's a young man, and obviously the first all that stuff before his mom dies, he is like a little bit shy, but he's just like trying to get used to the world kind of deer. But by the time he goes after Feline, I mean, he has to also like assert his manhood when that jerk deer comes out of nowhere trying to get
Yeah.
Feline. Like, is your name on the movie? Chad? What I don't know what his name is. And like Baby's like,
Kyle.
nah. And then and the movie doesn't try and get into human relationships on that either. It's just like, yeah, this is what
Mhm.
deer do. They fight over the woman. And Feline
Yeah,
clearly wants to be with Bambi, so
but I mean, I guess it doesn't matter who she wants to be with, because it's really just about who wins that fight.
thankfully
um
she wanted to be with the stronger deer.
yeah, thankfully. um I guess we could get into, but we don't have to. No, it's pointless. Of like presenting the animals in just like their natural state, and if that is trying to communicate anything about like human nature. But I don't think that there's like much of a connection point between those things. So yeah,
Yeah,
Bambi.
in many ways, it just feels like a very much like a celebration too of nature, and just it's like a movie that just wanted to almost encapsulate the beauty of nature, really, in a lot of
Yeah,
ways.
absolutely. Again, it's I'm going with, it's a hangout movie about life in the forest, and it captures that beautifully.
Yeah, yeah,
So Jacob, with that, I'm I'm all set. I think we've covered everything. Unless there's anything else that you want to talk about, I think we can jump into some recos
Rex.
for Bambi.
I'm interested. I'm interested to see what you got because I know you were trying at the last minute to switch out your Rex. My Rex are going to be, I think, fairly fun and interesting. But who starts first is the question.
Who starts first is the question. Yeah, I'm not thrilled with the recommendations that I came up for this one. I feel like I could have spent more time brainstorming stuff to get some more interesting picks, but yeah, I didn't get to it. So I think you can, maybe I'll go first since
You go
mine are kind
first.
of basic,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then you've got the more fun ones. So you'll be the closer. Um, I'll open it up with some boring basic stuff, and then you'll come in with the fun. So I'm recommending all movies. For my first one, it's going to be a movie that we spoke about at length in comparison to Bambi. It's Bambi in Africa. It's hard to watch Bambi and not think of this movie, especially as a child of the 90s who grew up watching this movie over and over again. So my first recommendation is, of course, The Lion King, because it's just like it's a perfect double feature.
Yeah, it is. If you thought you were sad watching Bambi, now get ready to cry again.
Yeah,
Watching Mufasa die. Just a double feature cut where you just watch the death scenes
the
back
death scenes.
to back.
Yeah. And I
Um,
mean, The Lion King in terms of Nazi Germany imagery is much more um what's the word that I'm looking for? It's just much more overt than
yeah,
whatever it is that, the allegory might be hiding underneath the surface of Bambi.
right,
So,
right. And don't watch, regardless of how good the new Mufasa movie is or isn't. Don't watch it if you don't take into account any of that backstory because that's just kind of dumb. Like
yeah.
backstory for Mufasa, honestly.
Yeah,
Like
and I'm definitely talking about the animated version of The Lion King. Don't watch the Jon Favreau.
right here, Raph is recommending 2019, The Lion King, the
I've
master.
never been more upset. No, that's not true. I have been more upset walking out of a theater, but that movie angered me so in such unreasonable ways. I really did not like it at all.
Yeah, I alternatively I felt pretty much nothing. Just like okay, like that was a really bland version of what I know to be The Lion
Yeah.
King.
That was when I totally turned on. I was never fully in on the Disney remake train, but that was when I was fully out and realized that it is just like the coldest, most heartless money grab imaginable with no artistic integrity whatsoever.
Right. And they don't even remake the right movies. If they remade Treasure Planet or
Yeah.
Atlantis, The Lost Empire, I'd be freaking down. I would be in for that.
Yeah.
But they're remaking the classics that already have that you cannot beat. And you cannot one thing real quick since we're recommending Lion King in relation to Bambi, I think it's so interesting because Lion King obviously has one of the best not only the best animated film scores, but one of just the best film scores.
Mhm.
And it's a film score that like I can play right now in my head. Versus Bambi, which doesn't have a memorable score really at all to me because it's totally separate thing. Like we mentioned, like the score is completely tied to the movement on the screen. So like
Mhm.
it's not like a jingle. You're not remembering it, but when you're
Yeah.
watching it, it's so effective. Interesting. Two unique styles.
Yeah. All right, what's your first recommendation before I keep rambling on about how much I dislike Disney remakes?
So my first recommendation is also a '90s animated film that I usually consider my favorite animated film of all time, um, which will probably go into the canon at some point. It used to be a little bit more niche. Now it's not so
Mhm.
much, thanks to things like Ready Player One. And I'm talking, of course, about the Iron Giant, which most notably, why I would recommend the Iron Giant for Bambi, besides being my other favorite animated movie of all time, is the deer scene. Obviously, we have a very impactful deer death scene in the Iron Giant from a totally different vantage point, and just that beautiful conversation between Hogarth and the giant about what it means to die and what it means to kill and to be a gun. But Iron Giant is just such a fantastic, beautiful movie. One of the funniest movies that to me it makes me laugh as much as just about any movie. Um, People forget, and people also focus very much on the giant. But
Mhm.
Hogarth Hughes is just one of the funniest characters. It's kind of got the same thing as Lilo and Stitch. Like everyone loves Stitch, but they forget like Lilo is just one of the funniest characters ever.
Yeah.
Like the human companion sometimes is actually like the real star, but you get lost because the cool creature.
Yeah.
Like Hogarth is
Yeah.
freaking hilarious. Iron Giant is a movie I can watch anytime, and it's not as sad as
I
Bambi.
haven't seen that movie in years, but I'm not surprised that you're an Iron Giant guy. That tracks. I need to rewatch that movie for sure. Is that also Bird or
Yeah, Brad Bird.
yeah? I mean, that guy's
Brad
got
Bird.
bangers. Yeah, what a legend.
All bangers when it comes to animated stuff, and then he's
Yeah,
got
and his
Tomorrowland.
Mission Impossible movie.
I haven't seen his Mission Impossible movie. I haven't really seen much Mission Impossible, but
Yeah, he's got Mission Impossible.
Tomorrowland was a little bit of a clunker, but
Yeah, but other than that, bangers. Amazing. Um, cool. From for my second recommendation, I'm going to go with another Disney animated movie, and I'm between two right now. But I think the one that I'm going to go with is um, one that was like always kind of a favorite of mine, which I think it's one that people love, but maybe it's not like considered one of the classics. It's maybe a little goofier than some of the other Disney animated classics, but a movie that I still find to be very fun, very rewatchable, and super enjoyable is The Aristocats.
nice,
Love that movie. Yeah.
nice.
More talking animals. Yeah.
I don't even know if I've seen Aristocats all the way through. Like I'm familiar with it, so I need to give that a watch because, um, yeah, like I hear people love that, but then it's just I don't know. Somehow it slipped through in the Disney.
Yeah. It's
Like
like kind of like it's like the hipstery pick of Disney animated movies to be like, that's my favorite. Also, and so talking about remakes, apparently they're in development of making an Aristocats remake, but at the helm is Questlove. So I'm a big fan of Questlove. I, typically enjoy whatever it is that he does. I think he's a really interesting, voice and, sort of creative force. So I would be interested to see what his spin on it would be. I think that he would have like more of a take or like interesting intentional approach to remaking that movie as opposed to just like we're doing a money grab copy paste of the OG, you
right,
know, animated movie.
right,
So that's like
right.
the one that I'm like kind of interested in more so than any of the others.
What about a Tom Hooper Aristocats? That's
Wait,
like
who's Tom Hooper again? Is that the dude who made
the live action cats. The cat
No.
where the Aristocats are all in the same style as the cats of that movie.
Yeah. I'm I'm gonna pass on that one.
A weird human cat saying everybody wants to
Yeah.
be a cat. Bizarre.
What's
We're
Domino's
gonna,
recommendation?
well, she was talking about cats, and she's got some cat friends, so she wanted to hop
Yeah.
up here. Um, okay, so this is going to be an interesting one to see if you have any, if you've even seen this movie. This is not as much of a, um, or viewers. I know some people haven't seen this movie and they know about at least part of it. So, my recommendation is a movie I watched sometimes growing up. My Girl, My Girl, starring Macaulay Culkin.
Yes.
Macaulay,
I don't think I've seen it.
um, which I don't want to spoil it for people, but it's about a young girl who is the daughter of a mortician, and she just kind of like a coming of age kind of story. But and this, I mean, I want to spoil it because like if you haven't watched it, just stop, and if you want to go. But like the connection, in order to connect it to Bambi, I have to spoil it. Like
Yeah.
there's a very traumatic moment. Macaulay Culkin's character is allergic to bees and gets stung and dies. And um, and so that is obviously very traumatic moment for a young girl who that was her best friend. And the viral like thing that people would know about it is so they've put him in his coffin, and it's of course it's like open casket, and she goes up there and he doesn't have his glasses on, and she's like very emotionally like, where are his glasses? He can't see without his glasses. And it's just very like
Yeah. That's
very
a
like
great connection. Um that I haven't seen it, but I think at this point pretty much everyone knows the deal with that movie and what the big spoilery
yeah.
event is.
My other option
Yep.
for this spot was Bridge to Terabithia, so
Oh,
Same.
I don't know the spoiler there, but
Well, it's a similar spoiler.
yeah, that's just a hilarious name for a movie. So silly. That's a. It's like I don't know if you are familiar with like the memes of like guys who sit around and just like name old athletes, like old like baseball players or whatever, like but like specifically with funny names. I feel like there's also a category of people who just sit around and name like random movies, and Bridge to Terabithia is like always the one that will get a bunch of chuckles in that in that game. But yeah, My Girl is that's a good recommendation. I like it. I like where your head was at for that. Traumatic death scenes. Hell yeah. Shout out to those. We're just a couple of sickos.
Especially in the children's coming of age genre.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm gonna change pace a little bit, and I'm gonna talk about a movie that is connected to Bambi in that it is a movie about young men who are gallivanting around trying to get laid, because that ends up being a big part of Bambi after his mom dies. He's like, wow, I'm so sad. What does he do about said sadness? He teams up with Thumper and Flower, and they're like, guys, let's go get some girls, which is a hilarious way to deal with your mother's death. There's no death in this movie that I'm recommending, but it is one of my favorite movies about the silliness of young guys trying to bop around and find girls to hook up with. I'm of course recommending probably a movie I've recommended before, but it's one of my favorite movies. 2007, Super Bad.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice. Super bad. That's a direction for the live action Bambi, but like super bad where it's just Flower, Bambi, and Thumper.
yeah.
Just
I guess Flower's kind of the McLovin of the group.
yeah, right. And then they're just trying to chase tail and do get into hijinks and
Yeah,
R-rated live action Bambi,
yeah. There it is. We already have live action Bambi. We don't need to remake it. It's called Super Bad.
but with Bambi.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, it took me a long time before I saw Super Bad, and I've only seen it once, so it's like it hadn't quite like gotten into my bones yet, but I did quite enjoy it.
Yeah, that's like one of my favorite movies of all time. I love Super Bad.
I feel it. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of
Yeah.
fun. Um, Man, we're already on our last recommendation, but for
Yeah.
those, but we're filming Snow White tomorrow, so we're we're gonna be like recommending 6 movies in 2 days, or
Yeah.
things rather, and maybe not movies. I'm excited about my recs for tomorrow that I've held back. That are more since that's the first Disney movie, I tied more Disney centric
Yeah.
to that. So this last movie is a really kind of wild to pair with Bambi because that's what we like to do. Um, but so much of the time spent on Bambi is like just Bambi learning how to walk and just watching Bambi walk around all funny and the
Hmm.
physical comedy of that, and like also Bambi not knowing what to call things or not knowing how to like interact with society and all of the people around him kind of laughing at those mistakes and trying to kind of teach him how to engage with the world,
Hmm.
and how he learns like how he kind of goes on this journey to find his place in the world and learns how life operates. And there's another movie that came out pretty recently that is I mean really the same when you think about it, and that movie is Poor Things.
Yeah. A lot of learning how to walk around, a lot of learning how to name things or identify things. That's a perfect recommendation. That's amazing. I'm so happy that I went first and you went last for for these, because that is the best way to end the recommendations for Bambi. That's so good.
Warning for people who haven't seen Poor Things: a little more nudity than Bambi. Well,
Yeah.
human nudity. There's a lot of animal nudity in Bambi.
Yeah. But
Taste
also people going around after the death of a mother, right? People going around trying to get laid.
yeah, that's
That's what
correct.
life is all about. It's
A lot
just
of lot
people
of
trying to
Twitter,
get laid.
lots of
Yeah.
Twitterpation, and very much like just instinctual too. The sex is very instinctual in Poor Things versus really romantically humanly. It's just like something that happens, just natural. Uh,
Yeah. I love it. That's so good.
Double
That's
feature. Watch Bambi if you got kids. Sit 'em down, watch Bambi, and then watch Poor Things. You'll have a
yeah.
great
And sit the kids down for Poor Things as well because they
right.
need to learn
Exactly.
about Willem Dafoe and other things. That's so good. Jacob, this has been so much fun. Like you mentioned, or like we've mentioned, we will be back next week for the other classic Disney animated movie that's in the canon, and that is, of course, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So that'll be another fun conversation. We're running it back double. Well, not really a double feature, but back to back weeks. Disney animation stuff. Our newly appointed Screen Age Wasteland Disney animation aficionado Jacob Holmes will be with us once again. Screenagers, we hope to see you there. Jacob, any final goodbyes you want to say to folks before we wrap this up and catch back up with them next week?
Well, I'm just so glad to be back on the canon. This is my actual first episode of this season. I think I was on the bonus episode.
Oh yeah, previewing the season of this. Yeah,
So I kind of missed out, and then now I'm on back to back episodes. And I think if I'm not wrong, I'm going to be on Black Narcissus. So I'm going to be on a lot of these last episodes of as we wrap up. When's the season wrap up, Raph?
the season wraps up in June, and then we will take a little. We'll be on holiday in July, and then we'll be back in either August or September. So yeah, the tail end of season 6, the folks are getting their Jacob fix, which is good. Everyone needs it. A lot of our feedback this season has been not enough Jacob, uh, so we're giving it to him now. And like we said, you'll be back again next week talking Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So very excited for that one. Screenagers, we'll catch you there. And as always, in the meantime, we will catch all of y'all in the wasteland. Bye, everyone.